the budgeted funds, purposes, and revenue sources for each. Think of the budget process as an 18-month snapshot covering the last 6 months of this year and then all of 2024, projecting what we expect to bring in and spend, with the only solid figures that we know are really our June 30th cash balance and then remaining appropriation for this year. So with that, you'll see we were expecting or anticipating enrollment to be around 1410. Impacts on revenue would be enrollment, assessed valuation, impacts operations, fund and taxes. Indiana statewide average income impacts the operations fund, as I'll explain that later. Circuit breaker impacts the operations fund. Our loss is estimated to be $568,000 for 2024. And then investment return on deposited funds. The next slide, we'll see the education fund is used from everything from teachers to principals, nurses, classroom supplies, instructional aids, all the way through to athletics. Education fund revenue sources would be the state basic grant, academic performance grants, spec ed grant, CTE, non-English speaking grant, local income tax also funds education, and miscellaneous other revenues such as reimbursements and summer school. Operations fund covers transportation, bus replacement, capital projects, general fund, operational, business office, human resources, utilities, custodial, maintenance, and property insurance. Operations fund revenue sources on the next slide are funded by local taxes, including commercial vehicle tax, financial institution tax, and excise tax. Money transferred from the education fund, the state permits up to 15% of that, and the state also sets the maximum levy the operations fund can grow by. The maximum levy growth quotient is based on a 6-year average of Indiana's non-farm personal income and is calculated annually by the state budget agency. The increase for 2024 is 4%. The DLGF projects we will lose $568,000 to property tax cap losses. The debt service fund pays for lease rentals, general obligation bonds, associated fees. The revenue we would receive is commercial vehicle, license excise, financial institution, with the balance funded by property taxes. Dr. Glaze included some historical slides here for you. The 6-year budget history shows total budget, assessed value, and tax rate. If you notice on the top line there, the tax rate has the asterisk by that, and that indicates that's our advertised rate. This will be reduced by the DLGF once they work our budget in December. And as stated, and we confirm this is still current practice, is to budget high and use a reduced assessed evaluation when you're projecting and budgeting. Building higher budgets allows for flexibility as circumstances change. And once we advertise that rate, we can never achieve a higher rate during that calendar year. So that's very important, especially to the operations fund. What other slides did you have on here? Advertised versus approved total budget history. So for 2023, they approved exactly what we asked for, and of course, we'll see what happens in December. Next slide, AV and tax rate history. And you'll see the actual AV there at 786 million. The next slide is fund appropriations, what we requested and what we received. And the next slide would show our certified employee numbers from 2017 forward. Any questions on that? The next slide will detail our budget forms. The first form that really starts the process for the budget is the current year financial worksheet. That worksheet sets out our current year budget expenses, remaining appropriation for the last 6 months. If we expect to add or come in under appropriation, the DLGF needs to know that. And we are assuming we will come in under on both the education fund and the operations fund. The June 30th cash balance is displayed on this form, along with what we estimate we will bring in December for property taxes on operations and debt service. And all of this information rolls over into the Form 4B, which will be the last form we talk about, which sets the rate. The next budget form is Form 1, the budget estimate. These are our estimates for the upcoming year. Debt service, we built the budget at $3,885,173. The education budget, $11,402,361, and operations $5,322,191, for a total annual budget of $20,609,725. The next budget form is revenue estimates. You can bring that up for me. Sorry, I'm ahead of you. Okay, budget Form 2, our revenue estimates. That left column is projected revenue for the last 6 months of this year, and the right-hand column will be 2024 calendar year estimates. The Form 4B, so all that information flows into this form, is an estimate of available funds and where we compute the tax rates. It's an 18-month snapshot. So first, if we're going to look at, this is the debt service, Form 4B, and that fund must carry an operating balance of 15% of the total payments we expect to make in the subsequent budget year, or the first payment, whichever is less. So it's mandatory that we carry that $626,708 listed here, plus the payments that we expect to make of $3,885,173. Once we consider the revenue in, that balances out. And the anticipated, well, the rate that we publish is 0.5932 with that reduced AV. The next one is our education fund. This is not based on a tax rate or an assessed value. This is just strictly expenses and revenue. So with that, we drafted it at $11,402,361 with a supporting revenue. The cash balance would roll over from the end of December, plus the miscellaneous revenue we hope to achieve in 2024, less the transfer to operations, and the cash balance indicated, then the need would be met, and that balance would, that budget would be funded. Next budget is operations, drafted at $5,322,191. Again, what we expect to pay out in expenses, receiving revenue for the last 6 months and all of 2024, hoping to achieve an operating balance at the end using the reduced AV. Our rate would be 0.6145. And then, of course, we, after our work session, posted that notice to taxpayers, which is the legal advertisement for the publication. That was posted in Gateway on September 13th, 10 days ahead of our public hearing this evening. And then our adoption meeting is scheduled for October 10th at 6:30.
Thank you, Brooke. Does anyone have any questions on that part?
Brooke, just to be clear, that rate of 1 point something, that's a defensive posture, right? That we, since we can't ask for any more than that during the year, we put a big number out
Yes,
there. And
right.
then that'll come back to us as they work out our budget in December.
Right,
correct?
that'll come down as they work the budget, and we're closing on those 2 leases in December, so we'll be working with Jeff Falkenbush, Baker Tilly to adjust those schedules, and that rate will be established at that time.
Okay. But
So,
again, that's just
Yeah.
so that
right,
worst case scenario, if we had to go 1.2, it's there.
right, because we can never go higher than what we've
Okay.
advertised.
Okay. Thank
And,
you.
you know, for the operations fund, that rate is so critical because if there is any error in the assessed value by maybe the county had a problem or whatever, not that they have, but if they did, then that rate being high times the reduced AV would still get us as much money as we could ever
Okay.
get.
So a
Yeah.
housing bubble,
Yes.
something like that, that insulates us from,
Yes,
Some-
it
okay.
helps, yep.
okay, thank you.
Mhm.
That's all.
Anyone else?
You all have copies of the capital projects plan. We're not going to be able to project that, but I'll be glad to answer any kinds of questions regarding this. So to give you a little bit of history on the capital projects, plan. We used to have a defined tax rate for capital projects. Now we just have, of course, the operation fund, and but they didn't take away the requirement to do a capital projects plan. So we kind of throw out some ideas of what we think we may be purchasing over the next 3 years. And again, this just provides us with an opportunity to do some planning. So even though these numbers are here, it does not necessarily mean that's what we're going to spend that money on. But we do try to do some planning. We definitely want to look at, in 2024, the potential for replacing the roof on the auditorium. That's something that has been kind of milling about here for the last couple of years. And then we also want to make sure that we're keeping our parking lots up to good repair, because again, the little cracks destroy the parking lot. So we want to make sure we fill the cracks, that we seal them, we do what we need to do there. So we always try to put some money in that area. And then we are at a point where our current Bobcat we can pay, I think it was nearly $17,000 to get the current one we have repaired. We can trade this one in, and it's about the same amount of money as far as what we would need to get a new Bobcat. So that's one of the things that we obviously would take a look at it next year. You'll also notice in 2025, these are all just kind of generic, band equipment, computer equipment, classroom furniture, all of those types of things. If we are able to do the roof repair for the auditorium, we're probably going to have to do that in 2 parts. So we'll try to get the oldest part first repaired, or the part that may be in the most disrepair. Again, there are small leaks. They're not bad leaks, but any leak is a problem if we don't try to fix it. So luckily we have Dan, who's the patching king. So anyway, so we'll try to split that into really 2 processes as far as a roof. And then of course, just some general parking lot upgrades. And then kind of projecting out for 3 years, everything is pretty much the same. Taking out a roof repair, looking at the ag vocational wing is probably another area that we need to look at pretty seriously. Once we get that roof replaced, our roofs will be in pretty good shape. So we've just been able to do small bits of those repairs. So again, trying to take it slow, trying to manage our dollars as well as we can is all what this is about. The other thing that I really want to do is the tuck point for the brick, particularly if you've had a chance to walk by where the automotive ag room area is, you'll notice the mortar is kind of pulling away. We want to get that taken care of, because that can lead to some pretty serious issues in the future. So again, just kind of keeping track of where we are with our buildings, and trying to keep those basic repairs that'll just make our buildings last longer, and again, keep the repairs as controllable as possible. So in general, the last page of this capital project just says kind of everything, kind of a start date, an ending date. Again, these are pretty generic. We would decide likely in the spring what we wanted to try to do as a summer project, and then we would have that discussion, get some bids, and move forward. And so again, it just kind of has some generic timelines in there about when we would try to do those particular projects. And then the back page is just the copy of the resolution that we would ask you to sign upon approval of the capital projects plan in October.
Is this operations money?
Yes.
And would that include the money we got from the band camp, the troopers this summer? Where is that?
This is just operations funds.
Does that money
So
go in?
the money that we would get from the troopers, a big chunk of that will go to the band, but then what we would get from that would just go into the operations fund, just kind of in the general location.
Yeah,
So
just we had talked about it would fund the band for
Yes,
a
yes.
while. So when I
yes,
saw that
yes.
on here, I mean, those are all
Oh,
the same
you mean
dollars.
the band instruments?
I didn't
yeah.
know how we meant we would
Yeah.
fund the band, but
What we do with those is we give, so the band and choir, when they need to purchase large instruments or equipment, we try to put that into the budget. So if suddenly we would have a sound system for the choir that would go belly up, we would have the money in the budget to be able to purchase that. So anything over $10,000, we just kind of have to throw in there. So there is that $30,000 bucket, but that doesn't necessarily mean there'll be $30,000 spent. Does that make sense?
but it's there if they need it for little things.
Exactly. So, if Ms. Wallen comes up and says, hey, I need, a new set of timpani or something like that, which is probably would take all of that money, but, then we would have some money. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Sure.
No, that's a good question.
And again, this is kind of like the city does with their grants, right? They have to put a project in there to get it approved.
Correct.
These are earmarks for amounts, not necessarily projects, right?
Correct.
So
Correct.
I don't need to get all spun up on $90,000 for the band. It's just, we're earmarking $90,000 for
Right.
something.
Right. Right.
And that's a placeholder. Is that
And-
fair?
Yes.
Okay.
And the other thing is, no one will ever look at this. I mean, there's a strong probability that we'll upload this to the DLGF and no one will look at it. Again, it's just kind of one of those things that we're required to do by statute. And if they are looking at it, we've got it accounted for.
Yeah.
So, yep.
So I'm just saying, 30,000 a year for the band and
Yeah.
15,000 for
Right.
security equipment.
Right,
And I'm
right.
like, are we gonna have that conversation? I don't think so.
Yeah.
We're just placeholding the
Correct.
money, and then somebody's gonna come to the board and say, I
Correct.
want to spend X, and we're gonna have that.
Correct.
okay,
Yeah, you're not
Okay,
approving any of the expenditures. It's just the
it's just
budget.
there. Okay,
Yeah,
yeah, cool.
yeah, just that money is there. It may or may not go to those things.
Gotcha.
And, or if the roof repair becomes a lot more, then maybe all of that money that
Right.
is going towards a roof repair. So it just kind of depends. Yeah,
Okay.
but you're right. Good question.
All right, thank you.
And then the bus replacement, again, we are required to do a bus replacement plan. And this is a 12-year plan. So what we try to do is project out for the next 5 years what buses we would attempt to replace. So you'll notice here the top two lines. These are the buses that we would order for 2024. By the way, the buses that we ordered last year still aren't here. So there's no good chance, there's not a real good chance that we'll get those in any kind of a timely manner. But we want to project that out. And then we would pay for these through the GEO bond that we passed earlier this year in order to try to help out what we're spending in operations. So again, this is a little bit of a projection. And basically we do that by the number of miles that are on the buses and really more of the wear and tear on the body. Because honestly, the engines will go and go and go and go. It's just Indiana winter sometimes does some crazy things to the bodies of the chassis and different things like that. So again, we try to take a look at that and we just try to set that up on a rotation. One of the really positive things is we thought we may have to replace a special education bus, but now we know that the student that we are currently transferring to Indianapolis, that we put a lot of miles on our buses, that will be a situation where that student will age out of the program, and so we won't have to be making that trip every day, which is a good thing because the special needs bus, because we have to have a wheelchair lift, are very, very expensive. So once again, we would ask for you to approve that at the adoption meeting on the 10th of October, and that's pretty much the bus replacement.
Can I ask a quick question on that? Because, and again, there's no net new spend here.
Right.
We passed the GO bond,
Mhm.
everybody high five.
Mhm.
This is just detailing out how we're
Correct.
going to spend this and letting the LGF know that this is our plan over the next few years
Correct.
to access that bond.
Absolutely.
Okay, so
Yes.
there's no net
No.
to the operating fund here. Okay, thank you.
Not at all.
Do
That's
we-
all I
That's
have.
helpful.
Do we know, watched some of the city council meeting last night, and they talked about 31 project and
Yeah.
possibly only having one spot to cross 31. Is that how I understand it? How does that affect busing and miles and fuel and time kids are on buses?
It will have an impact, and we've been aware of this possibility for a period of time. It will mean that we will have to rework some of our routes. It may mean that we have a couple of routes that are going out west that may not be very full because of just the time period
Yeah.
it's going to take to get kids to their home. So in a lot of ways, we know it's coming. Once they get a finalized plan, I think we'll be ready to make some decisions. But we're just kind of waiting to see because things have a way of changing. So it's going to be a challenge. I'm not going to deny that because with only really one crossover in our district, that's going to make things just a little bit difficult, especially when we're going out west.
I've heard that that was coming, and I know they're arguing about it, and they want division to
Yes.
be a crossing, but
Yes.
it's still,
Yes.
from us south, that is significant.
And Lori's been looking at it, and just, doing some preliminary thinking on how it would work, but there's a likelihood may have to add another route just for the length of
Yeah.
time the kids would be on
Right.
the bus. So we just have to see. And then we also have to see who's actually going to use bus transportation that's gonna live on that other side of 31. So there's all kinds of different variables that will go into that before we have to make the decision. So, but good question. And it's gonna be
Could affect this.
it's gonna be an adventure. Yes, it is.
Along those lines, is a school corporation allowed, I mean, can we use smaller buses if we're sending them out there? Can we use, I mean, I don't know
Yeah,
if
I mean-
activity bus is an option, but just saying, can we
Yes.
save and have a smaller bus?
One of the
Two of
things,
those or
one of the
something.
things one of the buses that we purchased this last year was it's actually a yellow bus with a stop arm. And, you have to have a yellow card, but you do not have to have a CDL. So what happens if you get a minibus that is a yellow minibus, you can actually drop off at the driveway for a student. So that would be one of the ways we would likely look at that. You still would have, and again, about half the price of a full-size bus. We would just have to take a look at how that works.
How many students
and
you're
how many students we've got, but that is definitely an option. The nice thing is that it would not require a CDL, and we would be able to get a driver probably a little bit easier than what we can right now with the demands on the CDL licensure. So.
Are buses allowed or supposed to cross where there's not an interchange or light to cross 31? I'm just thinking there's not much room in the median for them if they couldn't cross at one time.
Well, they would just cross wherever they're
Roundabout,
28.
the
Are you saying
Well,
currently?
right,
Are you saying currently, Andrea?
Yeah.
So like at
We-
500 versus 28, are buses supposed to go across 31 without an interchange
No.
or a
Yeah,
stoplight?
that's one of the issues that we have right now, particularly. And so what Lori does is she actually works with the families. Some of those families actually bring their kids in, but some of them actually will take their kids to a stop where we don't have to cross over. So once that crossover is built, that does make that part a lot easier, especially right now when we've got construction going.
I guess right now you can't cross division anyway, so we only have one way right now.
Correct.
Across.
Yeah. So that would actually be a benefit to us. See, and that's for other people to argue. We've gone to the meetings regarding this. We've stated what we want. At some point, whoever makes that decision will have to make that decision. So,
Well, I know there's businesses on that side too, pushing for
sure,
that division.
absolutely. We'll have to we'll have to see, how that all works out.
So the good news is they're always thoughtful, what the school needs.
That's fine.
They are always looking out for us, that's for sure.
Are there any other questions from the board? Okay. And I don't believe we had any public comments, correct? Okay, no public comments. Budget, so then I need a, you sure? Podium's ready. All right, then with that, I need a motion and a second to adjourn this meeting.
To adjourn our special meeting.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much for
Thank you all.
coming.
Thank you for your work, Buck.